Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Star. Today I thought I'd give you an official October garden tour. This is my first garden tour and it wasn't the best. I wasn't in frame most of the time. The plants were in frame and that's all that really matters. With that said, let's get started. This is the first garden bed. As soon as you walk into the garden area, I put a shade cloth about less than 2 weeks ago and I'm already going to take it out today because the temperatures are cooling down a lot here in zone 9B. First thing that I have here is a Don Juan red rose. As you can see, it doesn't look red. It actually looks like a really hot pink, but the new blooms are coming out a little bit more red. And I don't know if right now they're hot pink because of the pH balance in the soil or what, but I'm confident that soon they'll start coming out true to their color. Along the front part of this trellis, I have tomato plants. So I have some Dr. Witchies, some German pink, brandywine, Tommy toe, and cherry tomatoes. A few weeks ago, I had a ton of seedlings and I was too scared to thin them out because I thought something might happen to them where if I thinned them out, there would be another heat wave or just something where I would lose a lot of my plants. And that's exactly what happened. So I thinned them out and then we had that really cold, windy day and a lot of them just got torn to shreds. If any of these produce any suckers and I have enough time before the frost date comes, I'll try and put some in the ground to see if I can get some tomatoes out of them, although I'm not sure if I'll have enough time. So at the front of this garden bed, I have some Aunt Molly's ground cherries, and they actually produce quite a bit of fruit. Some of them got just tangled up with these romas right here, but you can see even just here, they have a ton of ground cherries on them. The kids love staring at them. They look like little lanterns or like little tomatillos. And I've never tried a ground cherry before, so I'm really excited to see what it tastes like. Now here, I have some Roma tomato plants that were starting to produce flowers, but about 2 days ago it was really cold and windy and it just tattered them. The base of them still looks really good and some of them still have their tops on, but like this one for example got topped and so did its other branches, which is a horrible thing for these in particular because they're determinate tomatoes. They only grow to a certain height and now the height's pretty much been chopped off, so I don't know if I'll actually get anything off of them. Now over here I have some broccoli plants, some Walton broccoli and some Calabrese broccoli, and I also have some sprouts just popping up. Even though these sort of got blown to the side, broccoli is really cold hardy, so I know they're going to do just fine. The only thing that I have been putting off that I need to stop procrastinating on is I need to come in and spray these with neem oil because there are some pests that have been eating my plants. So back here in this garden bed, I have some arugula plants. I had actually never tried arugula before growing it in my garden, and it's got more of a spicy flavor to it. I really like it in place of lettuce on things like sandwiches or even just mixed in a salad. Now this middle bed is just barely starting to take off. On this side, I have some sugar pumpkins. Because of the heat, this plant was just struggling to stay alive. And once I put up the shade cloth, it started doing amazing. My initial purpose for growing pumpkins in the first place was so that they would be ready for Halloween. And Halloween's about to be here in like 3 days. So that was a huge fail. But hopefully I can harvest some pumpkins for Thanksgiving and bake a pie with them or something. Next to that, I have some cucumbers. This is the Markemore cucumber. This is probably my third time reseeding these. I tried to start them earlier on the year, but again, it was so hot that my plants just weren't even germinating. And now I don't even know if I'll be able to harvest anything from them. They're barely starting to put off little tendrils. So who knows? Next year I know to start them earlier as well. Here in the front I have some basil. I actually have this entire portion seeded with basil and a lot of the sprouts are finally starting to come up. The reason I planted so much of it is because one of my daughter's favorite dishes is pesto pasta, and I wanted to have an abundance of it so that I can make it for her whenever she wants. Behind it, I have some lemon basil, and I love this plant because it just smells so good. I love the scent of this. I'm going to continue to plant it every year. I actually got the seeds for this one free from Baker's Creek, and at first I wasn't sure what lemon basil was or even if I was willing to put it in my garden, but I thought, what can I lose? If it germinates, good, and if it doesn't, then it was free seeds anyways, and I love it. I need to put it in a salad because it just smells so good, or maybe in a lemonade. Is that weird? I don't know, but it just smells delicious. In the center of this garden bed, I have a peace rose bush. I bought my climbing roses from Lowe's, And while I was there, I had seen this really beautiful soft pink rose, and I didn't get it at that time, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I decided to go back about a week later, hoping that I could still find it, and it was gone. So when I finally went back to Lowe's, I kept searching and searching for that rose, and they didn't have it anymore. And then this rose bush was in a pot that didn't have a tag or anything. It just had a little sticker and no actual blooms on it. It was not doing very well. The leaves were really yellow and sort of tattered. I looked up the name that I saw on the pot, and it's called the Peace Rose. And when I saw the picture, I fell in love with it. And if you guys know the history about the Peace Rose, or you guys decide to look it up, it's a beautiful backstory. So I brought it home and trimmed it off, and I actually started to propagate more rose bushes from this one. I'll show you guys at the very end. They're actually starting to bud out, which makes me really excited. And I put it here in the center of this trellis so that hopefully I can put maybe another one or two rose bushes in here. If not, I'm gonna buy planters and put more rose bushes around the rest of my backyard just so that you can have that beautiful fragrance of them. But this is one of my favorite plants here because when I bought it, the leaves were really matte and it just wasn't doing good. And now it has new growth, and the new growth is really glossy. The leaves are just this beautiful dark foliage, very different from the climbing roses. So I'm just really excited about this one. I love plants that have a really cool backstory to them. Over on this side in the front, I have some cilantro, which again, cilantro takes a while to germinate, and for a while I thought nothing was going to come up, but it's starting to sprout now, and especially with the cooler weather, it loves that. So hopefully in a few weeks I'm going to have a ton of cilantro growing there, which is perfect because I love to use it in my cooking. It's a staple in my kitchen. I buy it every single week, sometimes several times a week at the store. So it's going to be really cool to come out here and just cut it from my garden fresh. Along this side of the trellis, I had rawhide beans. Most of them just got destroyed by the cold wind the other day, which honestly makes me the saddest out of everything that was destroyed here. Although, you know what? There are some brand new shoots coming up, so there's still hope. Plants are actually really resilient. That's something that I learned this year, and I thought for sure that I'd have to come in and pull them out, but maybe I'm just getting ahead of myself because it's looking pretty good so far. And then towards the back of this bed, I have some zinnias, and I'm excited to see what they look like. I've actually never seen a zinnia in real life, so it's going to be a big surprise for me. One thing that I wish I had done differently is to start them from seed in trays. I sort of just sprinkled them here, and only these grew on this side and one on this side. So it's going to look a little bit uneven, and I could go in and dig them out and replant them, but I also sprinkled a ton of other seeds here, so I don't know what else is going to be growing. It was just a bunch of random flower seeds, so either way, it's going to look pretty, but next year I'm going to try to be more organized about the placement of plants. This bed right here is the bed that struggled the most this entire season. Back in July, I sprinkled a ton of seeds in this bed. I thought this was going to be my pepper bed, and I had a bunch of different varieties, but none of them ever sprouted. Again, that was my mistake because I should have started them in seedling trays weeks before that. I thought if I just sprinkled them in the garden beds, they would just sprout on their own. And it was just really hot, so the temperatures weren't ideal. This bed gets the most sun. It has no shade, and at that point in time, I didn't have the shade cloth, so nothing ever actually sprouted here. Since July, this bed has been the only one in the entire garden that was pretty much empty. But a few days ago, I reseeded everything with root vegetables. I feel like this is going to be one of the fuller beds once November and December hit. Whereas a lot of the other beds have vegetables that aren't as cold hardy, so soon those are going to be a little bit emptier, and then this one's going to start to flourish. Next year, I'm not going to make the same mistake. I'm going to start my seeds early, start them inside, and then transplant them in once they're a little bit more established. That way, they have a better chance at making it. And then also, I'm going to put up the shade cloth as soon as it starts getting warm. That way, they can actually grow. In this bed, I have some okra, and this was another bed where the okra did really good. I seeded beans a ton of times, but again, it was so hot that my plants just kept dying back. The okra, however, did really good. I think I've mentioned this in another video, but they remind me of little like Charlie Brown Christmas trees. They're very resilient plants. They did really good in the heat, and they're still growing and producing even though it's getting cooler now. I've been harvesting okra nonstop. I actually have a little stockpile of it in the fridge that I need to cook up because every time I come out here, there's more okra just ready to be harvested. If it hadn't been for these okra plants, this bed would have also been bare because things are just barely starting to take off like these beans. I've reseeded this portion so many times. At one point I had a different type of bean growing here, but they just never made it. So the seedlings that I have here now are the Chinese red noodle bean. This is possibly one of my favorite garden beds because it has green everywhere. On either side I planted two different types of watermelon. So on this side I planted some crisscross watermelon, and on the other side I had some Charleston Gray, and they're still producing a lot of flowers. I hope you can see here. I'll try to bring you guys in a little bit closer. These plants just did so good, you guys. They look so pretty because they're actually starting to climb over the trellis. And I've already harvested two watermelon from this side. The ones that I got from here were pretty small. They were around this size. And they probably could have been sweeter if I had waited just a little bit longer. But because this was my first time growing watermelon, I was so excited. I cut them off before they could reach their peak sweetness. And so they were still really good and sweet, but they could have been even sweeter had I been a little bit more patient. Towards the back here, I have some sunflower plants that were one of my favorite things about this garden bed. They were one of the few things that were super resilient in the heat, and they had huge heads. So I have some mammoth sunflowers and then some Henry Wild sunflowers more towards the center. However, once I put out the shade cloth, I don't know if they just weren't getting enough sunlight or what, because the heads just started getting really droopy. They started losing all of their leaves and the center started drying up. And they're mammoth sunflowers, so I know they're supposed to get huge, and there was no seed pods there either. So I wound up cutting them back, hoping that something positive would happen with the plants. When it comes to the mammoth sunflowers, I don't think that they'll produce another head because those typically just put off one. But the Henry Wild sunflowers, I still have hope that maybe they'll put off a few more blooms. On this little portion of the trellis, I have some sugar snap peas, which are doing really good. I can't wait for them to start climbing up the trellis. And that's one of the reasons why I want to be a little bit more careful about where I plant things, because these watermelon plants could have gone straight up, but they just started finding out however they wanted, and I didn't keep them in check. So they sort of started taking over this space. But once that watermelon plant dies back, the the sugar snap peas will have pretty much this entire trellis to themselves. There in the front, I have two, what are they called? Golden zucchini plants. They should have been pulled out a long time ago. I just didn't have the heart to do it. I had a bunch more zucchini plants put in there that I wound up thinning out, and these two just got really sickly. Something started eating the leaves, and then also with the intense heat and sun, they just wilted a lot throughout the day, and they never really recovered from it. I'm gonna wind up taking those out and just filling that area up with some more flowers. And this is my last garden bed. Along the bottom of the trellis, I do have some beans planted. Pretty much all of the beans that I had right here never made it. This is one of the only plants that survived, and even now it's not looking the greatest. The leaves are a little bit yellow. These are Christmas lima beans, and they looked so beautiful. They were one of my favorite parts of the garden, and the other day when it was really cold, it just came through and destroyed a lot of the leaves. This watermelon was so tiny just a few weeks ago. I actually included it in a vlog where I was just hoping that it would take off, and look at it. It's huge and it's still tiny. It's nowhere close to being ready to harvest, so I wonder how much bigger it's gonna get, and I can't wait to taste it. On the other side of this bed, I just have a ton of greens like lettuces and kale, mustard greens, things that do really good in cold weather. Things are just starting to sprout right now, so I feel like there's not a lot to show. But before I forget, here in the front, I also have some more zucchini plants. These are Black Beauty zucchini, which were honestly doing so good a few days ago. The leaves were huge, green, lush. With the cold wind the other day, it just knocked these plants around. And I'm gonna have to pull some of them out because, like this one back here, all the leaves are broken off, which is fine. I'm just gonna put some more greens in here. But I never got to harvest anything from these either, because the same thing kept happening where the heat would just make the leaves wilt so much, and I felt like the plants had a lot of green foliage and they looked really good, but they were using a lot of their energy just to stay alive. This is one of the two trees that we have in our garden. This is a bear's lime tree. My husband bought it from Costco. When he first bought it, it had a lot of white spots on them and it didn't have a ton of growth. A lot of the little branches that it had were really dry and it did go through a little bit of shock. But once I put the shade cloth over top, it just started going crazy and all of this is brand new growth. It looked a lot better a few days ago before the wind came and sort of messed with it, but overall it still looks really good. Limes are one of the things that we use the most in all of our cooking, and I've also heard that you can use these leaves in dishes because they're really fragrant. We didn't plant it in the ground because we have pavers, and this is a semi-dwarf, so I know the roots aren't going to get too huge, but we didn't want to risk them pulling any of the pavers up or maybe messing with the foundation of the house. This little tree, on the other hand, this one is still going through some shock. Like, it has a lot of leaf curl and it's seen better days and it will see better days, but it just needs to get through for right now. So this is a clementine tree. It's also a semi-dwarf. What's really funny about this is that my husband really wanted citrus trees because A, we use a lot of limes, and B, mandarin type fruit is his favorite, but he didn't want oranges. He wanted something a little bit more tangy, so I was looking everywhere for mandarin trees and I couldn't find any. I was calling different nurseries, just nobody had any in stock right now. So I went to a Lowe's and this was the very last one that I saw there. The tops of it were just flopping over when I planted them in this pot and the leaves just weren't looking too good. It had a lot of leaf curl. Also, when we first put it in the ground, a cat came in and scratched at the roots and threw soil everywhere. So it's been through a rough few weeks, but it does have some new growth, which makes me really happy. And some of the leaves are still doing really good. I can't wait to harvest clementines off of this tree because not only are they my husband's favorite fruit, citrus wise, but they're also my daughter's favorite and my son's. Eventually, I want to get a dwarf or semi-dwarf peach tree. We'll see. Whenever I find one, I might pick it up. This is it for now, you guys. Hopefully the next time you guys see me, the shade cloth will be off and the garden beds will look a lot better and the plants that did sustain any damage will have improved by then. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already and I'll see you in my next one. Bye guys.